We'll resume with the Recreation Culture Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is a presentation from Rosalie Burton, Doug Skiggs, and Brian Whitehead from the Muskrat Watershed Council. Go ahead.
Hi there, and thank you very much for having us at your meeting tonight. Just got to slip on these glasses, sorry. Can't read my own writing without them. So tonight I'm here to talk about promoting watershed health in the Muskrat Watershed, as well as giving you an overview and some information about the Muskrat Watershed Council. So that's a picture of our watershed, and you can see it outlined in the black squiggly lines there. That's the best way to look at it. But a watershed is an area of land that drains into a common body of water, and we've got all of the lakes, rivers, and streams basically draining into Muskrat Lake and then further out in the city of Pembroke. Everything is connected, including the lakes, rivers, and streams, the wetlands, the forest, the soil, the plants and animals. And from the resources we derive as people, we get goods and services so that we can have economic stability. The watershed management aims to decrease the impact of human activity on the watershed. So our watershed, as you can see, is multi-jurisdictional here. We've got the 5 municipalities in the county of Renfrew, and there's the 4 municipalities plus ourselves, and it spans an area of over 500 square kilometers, so it's quite significant when you look at it. And the watershed management is about the land and the water. So on that map, you see the Muskrat Lake is the recipient of the water that comes through the land, and Muskrat Lake is basically, we call it the bathtub because it's got a low flush rate and it collects all that water. And it has a very slow, because of the flush rate, it has a very slow turnover. And its ability to help itself and maintain healthy water is very difficult for it to do. Now, the reasons we want to move forward is Whitewater Region has the most waterfront development in the watershed. The waterfront development is a key element in the economic growth in the municipality. And as I mentioned earlier, healthy waterways equal higher land values, as well as clean, healthy water. So 20% of the watershed is in Whitewater Region, and it's about 60% of the residential watershed dwellings. We also have 65%, or 2/3 of all trailer, campground, and RV parks in the watershed. And we have in Muskrat Lake 9 kilometers of undeveloped land. So while we don't, a lot of the watershed land is in the neighboring municipalities, your partners, Whitewater Region is the most impacted and feels the most impact of what happens on the land. There's also strong community support for the solution to improve water quality in the watershed. In the fall of 2013, we had a water quality symposium that was co-sponsored by yourselves here in Whitewater Region, and there were 150 concerned individuals that wanted to stay involved and help look at how to improve water quality in the watershed. The Muskrat Watershed Council was then formed in, I think the official date was February 2014. And out of that, we have a science community, science and water quality community. They hosted Science Nights 1 and 2, and we had another about 100 people show up at those events to find out what they could do to improve the watershed. We have a strong representation of our agricultural committee. We have a director of agriculture, and we also enjoy agency support at the regional and district levels, as well as liaison with local lake associations, including the Muskrat Lake Association and the others within the watershed, such as Lake Dory and Mink Lake. So the Muskrat Watershed Council initiatives are here to help facilitate the implementation of the Muskrat Lake policies of the official plan, OPA 11, and the Township Strategic Plan, which was done a little while ago. And we're here to support that. And with the relationships that we have in the point 1 up there, we reach about 500 people now on our distribution list. So it's growing. We've got some momentum coming. It's growing in size and interest, and we're pleased that we can contribute in some way. So I've been talking about water quality, and people ask, well, what right out is the problem? And it's an excess of nutrients in the lakes, rivers, and streams. The impacts are severe. We see algae blooms increasing in frequency and severity. We have blue-green algae, which is a public health issue and why we're working with the Renfrew County District Health Unit. We have degraded aquatic ecosystems, which has fisheries impacts. We have reduced quality of life, and that impacts our residents, tourists, and recreation users because we have people who rely on the water to drink, swim, fish, etc., and some even for their business. Then we have business impacts, of course, on tourism and development, and municipal and property impacts where we have reduced property values and an erosion of the tax base. So our strategy when we formed the council was to have a no-blame, shared responsibility approach to this. Because it doesn't do us any good going back and looking at decisions that were made with the best information possible in the past. It's how we get everybody on the same page now and move forward. So I think that's been, to our benefit to adopt that approach. So I'll just take you through really it's a governance model, but this picture says 1,000 words because it also speaks to our ability to do outreach and communication. So the Watershed Council and how we're set up is in the center of this page, and it's a community-led organization with quite diverse backgrounds. I'll just add in that this model is evolving, and we're changing it as we go because we're learning. And we have a director, under the director positions, a director of fundraising, Julie Truelove, who comes to us with significant experience in applying for grants and contributions. So we're enjoying that, and that's not in that slide yet. On the outside, what you'll see is the various groups that we've consulted and are partnering with, and we start up there with the Renfrew County District Health Unit. We have other NGOs, ENGOs, and that's not all of them by no means, but it's a start. We have the County of Renfrew, which we've presented to in the past and will do again because of the change last fall. And then we have the municipalities, which I showed you are in the watershed. We have our meeting with Algonquin First Nation, April 4th. We've partnered with the academia in a large way, Algonquin College, and I'm going to speak to that in a few minutes. And we've, at the minister level and deputy minister level, engaged federal agencies such as Environment Canada, Fisheries and Oceans, and Agriculture, Food, and then we have our provincial ministries, which we have engaged at both the district and regional level. And finally, but probably most important, is the public, and that's the individual landowners. So we're working at getting all of the players engaged, and that is because watershed management and improved water, health of the water, is a very complex system, and it needs all the players at the table to move forward. So a bit about Muskrat Watershed Council and our vision. This vision was derived, and the mission, were derived at a public meeting that we held, and that was on May 1st, 2014. And it came out to be healthy land and water and quality of life for future generations on the Muskrat Watershed. Because everybody wants future generations to enjoy the water, and we know that there's no quick fix in sight. There's only steps we can take to improving water quality as we move along. The vision is very much a desired end state. It's where we want to be, where we see ourselves moving towards. And then the mission is what we do in a 3 to 5 year span of time, how we see our resources, our limited resources being used, and what our priorities are. So we use this mission to move forward, and it's very important that we have the using science-based knowledge, engage people with communities on efforts to identify and reduce nutrient loading from all sources on the Muskrat watershed. So that's a bit about why a watershed approach. Now, where we're going if we look ahead. We went for first nonprofit status to be identified as an organization in the fall of this year. We received it, and we're continuing to look. In our purview is the charitable status. That's because some of the granting bodies for the money that we're seeking funding from only or preferentially give their funding to charities as opposed to nonprofit organizations. And as a charity, of course, there's a charitable receipt, and there's all kinds of implications beyond being nonprofit. We want to continue doing identification of best management practices. The case that comes to mind is working with Stuart McBride at Admaston Bromley. He had in a grant application to expand and improve his farm, and ourselves were one of the people that helped promote his application. Now, he's not been successful to date, and when we learned, we dug into why. And that's because through the policy framework of the province, Muskrat watershed was not identified as a priority. Well, lo and behold, then we've contacted and are working with John Yakabuski, our local MPP, to see if we can't change that and have this area identified as a priority, realizing that we're competing with things like Lake Erie and Lake Simcoe. We want to do continued water quality monitoring with Algonquin College, and we do that through their environmental tech program. Now, last year we were very fortunate that we timed it to partner with them on what was considered a WAMPKI initiative. It's a long acronym that basically stands for Water Quality and Adaptation Management. But what they did is they went to 28 various sites through spring, summer, and fall, and did water sampling, water quality sampling for us. So we have a great amount of data that we've never had over an entire growing and harvesting and whole season. We didn't include winter because it's kind of it's kind of irrelevant to try and do water quality sampling in the winter, if you can visualize the canoes. However, there was a $70,000 grant. The water quality monitoring was carried out, and then they have been working with our Science and Water Quality Committee to bring that to fruition for us. And we've also had lots of in-kind contributions on that. We would like to continue doing our science-based solutions and recommendations through our Science and Water Quality Committee. We've got a committee of over 30 very well-resourced, very well-educated people working, chaired by Brian next to me, and they will come out with recommendations for the council, which will then be put into a remediation plan, which will be shared with you. We want to continue our outreach and communication. If I take you back to that governance model and outreach model, we do that on a continuous basis because we need to keep partners engaged and momentum going forward. Shoreline stewardship, this is where we're looking to partner with the Centre for Sustainable Watersheds out of Perth. We've already had contact, and they've indicated they will work with us, and the Muskrat Lake Association, so it's a three-person or three-triangle organization. And Shoreline Stewardship is a Love Your Lakes program, so that's a confidential, non-compulsory program where shoreliners learn what they can do along the lakefront to improve their shorelines for water quality. And so we're looking forward to starting that in the spring. We will continue lobbying government, working with John Yakabuski and Cheryl Gallant to identify ourselves as a priority and inevitably look for fundraising for sustainability. That's the goal here. And the fundraising, part of it goes back up to charitable status, and part of it goes to using that governance model to leverage every resource that we can. I'll just mention that we have and are currently applying for grants. I will tell you that we didn't bat 1,000 yet. We haven't got one in the park, but we have applied to the Great Lakes Guardianship, Trillium, Mountain Equipment Co-op, Valley Heritage for their local fundraising, and RBC. So those are some that are ongoing and that we look forward to doing very targeted fundraising in the future so that we I guess, get the best bang for our buck. Now, that's where we want to go, and then the question becomes, what do we need? So we've identified critical funding required for 2015. The water quality sampling program with Algonquin College that I mentioned that we had the grant for last year, it began in 2014, and we'd like to continue that for another year to show trending over time and evaluate those 28 sites throughout the watershed so that we have information that we can use going forward and people aren't pointing out one number and sticking to that. We also want to do an analysis and report by an arm's-length independent body that will lend credibility and validity to the water quality sampling. The water sampling was done by Algonquin College through their environmental tech program. It was then analyzed, the data or the water itself, by Ministry of Environment accredited labs, so we know that the samples are good. The thing is, now we need an independent party to do the validity and the credibility test and get a published report that will speak to the integrity of the data. And that's about $5,000. And then there's capacity building and operating funds for the Watershed Council, which is an investment of about $15,000. And the $15,000 goes toward things like charitable status, tax return, board insurance, annual general meeting, website fees, and training of board members. So there is an ask in this. All of this is not pointless. There's an ask in it for us. And what we're doing is asking that you include us as a line item in your budget deliberations going forward as a council. And we would like to partner with you, so please include us in your budget decisions. We'll look forward to continued support from you on endorsement on funding applications, because the more we can partner and leverage, the better off it is for everyone involved. And we ask that you encourage public support for us and partner with the other municipalities as we go forward, updating them on our activities. We've seen them once, they've invited us back, so we're really pleased to do that. And of course, this is our first stop, and we'd like to go forward saying we have your support moving forward. So at this time, I'd ask that we continue the dialogue, and thank you very much for your time, and we're here to answer any questions you have.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Seems like a ton of work has gone into it already, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any questions? Christine?
Just a little more information, particularly for the new members of council. Last year, we budgeted $4,000 in support of the Muskrat Watershed Council. The previous council's thinking on this is that, and I think this has proven itself out, that your organization would have much more chance of success and securing funding if you were separated from the township, supported by the township. We provide meeting space for you and administrative support, and there was also the seed funding last year to help you get the ball rolling with insurance and legals. But being an independent body, particularly one with charitable status, would allow you access to much more funding than if you were tied to the township. So that was basically the rationale.
Councillor Jackson.
Christine, was there, or Marcia, was there funding set aside that wasn't spent last year, or was that a different group?
No, it was all, there had been a request
for this year?
There had been a request to roll $1,000 over from last year into this year's budget, but all of the money has been spent.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
I'm just wondering, does the lake vary like on a colder year or a drier year? Is it every year the same, or does it change?
Well, I can tell you we know about the low flush rate, and that's consistent.
Yeah.
And we know that 4 of the past 7 summers we've had the blue-green algae, so it seems to be more persistent going forward. But maybe Brian will take that.
Sure. What we found is that in particularly warm, dry, hot summers with not a lot of wind, then the symptoms will be worse. Because particularly with the blue-green algae, when we had the drought, we had some bad incidences of algae, and the aeration of the water with the winds, and if it's windier and cloudier, then the blue-green algae form as quickly.
So for the most part, it stays the same over. It's a little worse, but it never goes away.
No, the concentrations, the phosphorus concentrations in the lake are in the order of 35 to 40 milligrams per liter, and average lakes run from under 10, like 5 to 10, and 20 is considered the absolute ceiling, and those measures never change. And there's also what's called sort of like it's already in the bottom of the lake. It's like in the sediment. It's going to be there for internal loading. Thank you. There's a high internal loading level in the lake that'll take a long time. But one of the advantages that we think we have compared to the big guys like Lake Erie and Lake Simcoe is we don't have any international boundaries to contend with. We don't have inter-counties. We've got a watershed that we think that we can make a difference in, and if we can get the right resources over time, and it's going to take some time, but we're optimistic that we can make some difference.
Any other questions? I just had one. How long have you been collecting samples now in different areas?
Well, historically, there's only ever been one sampling run that was done in 2000. There was a study done in 2005. And I should preface that by saying that the Ministry of Ministry of the Environment does sampling annually, and there is volunteer samples for limited sampling requirements. But MOE does annual phosphorus monitoring as a routine. And one of the maps we showed up there showed all the little dots on the lake. Those were their monitoring stations. But this is the first, last year was the first comprehensive watershed sampling program that's ever been done. There was only one other sampling program in 2005 done by MOE, had 4 sampling stations, one at the outlet from Lake Dory, and then 3 throughout the Snake River watershed. And of course it showed progressively higher chemical loadings, but the sampling program we did last year was the most comprehensive, and the whole idea there is to keep them. It's like your landfill site. You have to keep monitoring them in order to establish trends. So if you have one set of data, you need the types of crops that people plant may be different, or there may be changes or climatic changes that affect the results that you need to collect a strong database over time to build your case for the problem in order to get the message out. So that's why we're thinking that getting the monitoring program this year is one of our highest programs or priorities.
Is that monitoring program more or less to confirm what you may already know? Are you close to recommendation for solutions here, or is it continual monitoring?
That's a really good question. There's the pie chart, and the short answer is that this monitoring, the person that we've retained to do the analysis, could raise more questions. Could make recommendations on where to change the monitoring locations, take some out, maybe add another. I think, generally, this is the million-dollar question, right? Do you already know? It's sort of like, does smoking cause cancer? So, right? It's the elephant in the room. But, whether it's 6% septic systems or 59% Snake River, we know that, that there's enough science out there to know that there's phosphorus loading from agriculture and that there's phosphorus loading from septic systems and sewage treatment plants need to be upgraded. I mean, that knowledge is out there, but we need to really build our database to...
I think one of the key things that we want from the data is more detail on specifically where large amounts of phosphorus. So if we get, and we are going to need big money over a long time, if we get, whatever, make up a number, $50,000 to put into a pilot project for interrupting phosphorus, with that detailed data, we can see on the landscape where we could probably make the most difference. We want to get a sort of a picture of hotspots or where the concentrated sources are. So that's really an outcome that we're looking for from that data set.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize that what we feel as a Muskrat Watershed Council is the impetus to look at the situation and understand it, but then also have some action and some concrete results. I mean, people are, we know there's a problem and we need to move forward. So we have taken a few steps of concrete where you can actually touch and feel things that the Watershed Council has done. And we're looking at where's the best place to install a biocord raft, for example. If we know that technology helps, then where do we put it? And this further information or data collection will help us identify the hot spots, as Doug says.
Yes, Councilor Rieger?
First of all, I just want to commend you. You've certainly done a lot of work in the last year and a half here, and thank you for that, because I know there's a lot of hours and a lot of time has been put forth. I just have a question. For budget purposes, do you have a specific number in mind that you are hoping to get from us, or even a ballpark figure?
We are struggling as an organization to find our place, and that everyone who knows anything about this challenge knows that it's going to need money. Well, how do you get that money? How do you attract that money? And we are trying, and we do need we need to be able to spend some money to attract that money. So we need some basic operating funds, and we've identified that 15,000. If I could paint it this way, in other places in southern Ontario where these kinds of watershed issues come up, it's agencies called a conservation authority that responds and puts in place the things that we're trying to put in place. Working with affected municipalities, working with landowners, working on best management practices, informing the public. Those are all things that conservation authorities do. And we don't have a conservation authority here. And we have, and I come from the Ontario government, we have the Ontario government, several agencies with some jurisdiction on that lake. Certainly OMAFRA has a role in terms of its role with the agricultural community. Ministry of Municipal Affairs has a role through the municipal planning process. Ministry of Natural Resources has a role in shoreline, work around shorelines and managing fisheries in a lake. Ministry of the Environment has an overall responsibility for monitoring water quality, and Brian mentioned that they have come over the years and done, sort of single samples per year. They also have a responsibility for drinking water, but it's two completely separate organizations within MOE that fill those two functions. There is no agency whose responsibility it is to walk in and solve this problem or even paint the picture of what the solution looks like. If we leave this alone, it will get worse and people will get hurt. That's where we are. We're struggling, as I started out saying, we're struggling to find our place to help find a solution and fund it. I think, quite frankly, I think we have to shame the province and the federal government into stepping up here in a very big way. Certainly having the municipality engaged and supporting our efforts helps us in that. And if you're looking at this as part of a budget process, it would be wonderful if we $1,000 of our annual operating we didn't have to worry about it. We're also going to be talking to the other municipalities on the watershed and asking them for some financial support. But the problem with the other guys is they don't own the impacts, right? They're part of the watershed. Their people are contributing to the problem, but they don't have to deal with the outcome. They don't own that lake. That lake's in Whitewater. So it's harder to convince them to kind of pony up some cash, and so that's our challenge. And I personally, I think if I was speaking to you to convince you in terms of a level of support or even a commitment of support, it's I think the municipality has to be on board here, and I would suggest that you need to expect to have to contribute in some way to this effort on water quality annually.
Okay.
That answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thank you very much. The next delegation is Hugh Martin with Kayla's Kids Club.
Just want to say thanks for having us tonight. Kayla's Kids Club has been a wonderful challenge for us in Beachburg to get this rolling for all of Whitewater. And it's been great. We've had upwards of 78 kids playing this year, so we had a real good response. I got some letters of support from some of the parents, and the majority of them were willing to write letters in regards to the program. But I'd like to turn it over to one of our coaches. Dave Alexander has been a wonderful guy for us this season. Him and Mike Bradbury have been huge in our whole development of our kids. So I want to let Dave take over for some of it.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening, councillors. I was asked by Huey to help out with Kayla's Kids Club program in the fall of 2014. And one of my first questions was, what is Kayla's Kids Club? It was all new to me. And Huey can give you some of the details. I think some of you are already familiar, but the basics of it were to be able to provide a free hockey program to kids in Whitewater region in the ages 4 to 12 range. And the free part of it was key to a number of parents for various reasons, some financial, a lot for commitment reasons. They couldn't commit to a regular hockey program or minor hockey program, either because of the financial reasons or sometimes other reasons of commitment. They couldn't make it out regularly because of family commitments, work commitments, other sorts of recreational things. Maybe they ski on weekends with their kids, that type of thing. So it was a great program, gave them lots of opportunities. Some of my background, I've been a resident of Whitewater region for 14 years. I'm currently the president of the Foresters Falls Athletic Association. I help look after the minor baseball in Foresters Falls, the outdoor rink in Foresters Falls. And as far as hockey itself goes, I've been involved in hockey since I was 5 years old and have been either a coach or assistant coach in minor hockey for the last 15 years. So based on that, I'd accept Huey's request to help out with this program for 3 main reasons, and one of them being that Huey himself, I think, has done a great deal for You okay, Dave? You're turning pretty red.
Okay. I do. I'll get it.